You all. I've chosen the study of Zechariah chapter 6. It's going to be a study which we are going to cover for 2 days from tonight, and also in the morning we'll continue with it. So we will enjoy this study. It's a bit longish, so bear with. We are going to study a bit tonight, and then tomorrow will be heavy on the study. So let us introduce it tonight. And when we are going to finish it tomorrow, hopefully we'll finish tomorrow. If we don't finish, we'll let alone continue with it next Sabbath. Because this Sabbath, we can't continue with Zechariah 6. We've got Revelation chapter 12. And we're going to ponder into the prophecies to actually see where we are according to the prophecies. That's why we should dwell much on end-time prophecies. And this one, Zechariah chapter 6, is found in the Old Testament. And it's not in the New Testament, but it's talking about the New Testament. So that's why we cannot discard the Old Testament. It's got all the gems for us in the last days. So let us start from Zechariah 6 verse 1, and we are going to read up to 8. And I've had a chart here so that some of the illustrations will make it clear for us to understand this chapter. So let us read from Zechariah chapter 6 verse 1. Yeah.
And I turned and lifted up mine eyes, and looked, and behold, there came 4 chariots out from between 2 mountains.
Right.
And the mountains.
Right. Let's see what Zechariah is being shown. He's being shown 4 chariots. There is 1, 2, 3, and 4, this one. So we are going to learn more about these 4 chariots that he is being shown in that chapter. So he saw these 4 chariots. So what, then what? Yeah?
And the mountains were mountains of brass.
So they are between these 2 mountains of brass, right?
In the first chariot were red horses.
Right. The first chariot which emanated after this brass mountain is the horses of color red. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
In the second chariot, black horses.
So the second chariot starts from here. You can see this one led by black horses. Yeah?
And in the third chariot, white horses.
So we have
and in the
third chariot there are white horses. Never mind, there is ice cream here, so it all shows some people are not in the Sabbath together with us. So let's continue studying, yeah?
And in the third chariot, white horses.
So we have the third chariot here, which is white horses, right?
And in the fourth chariot, grizzled and bay.
But we have this very interesting chariot with 2 sets of horses, grizzled and bay. Did you see that one?
Yes.
So you can see in the first chariot only 1 set of horses, the red ones, and the second one the black ones, and the third one the white ones, and then the fourth one, supposedly the fourth one is the one that covers our period. And these have 2 sets of horses. So it's interesting when we dwell on the fourth one. That's where our lesson will be more heavier on the fourth one, because it's got 2 sets of horses, the grizzled and the bay. Right?
Then I answered and said unto the angel that talked with me, What are these, my Lord?
What is this? Like some people will say, I want the Bible and the Bible only. What are you reading there? Tell us. Without the spirit of prophecy, you will never know what Zechariah 6 is talking about. What are these? And Zechariah is asking also, what are these? Listen to the answer. Yeah?
And the angel answered and said unto me, These are 4 spirits of the heavens.
So these are 4 spirits of the heavens. And what?
Which go forth from the standing before the Lord, all the earth.
Right?
The black horses, which are therein.
The black horses. See, the description starts with the black one, which is the second set what does it do? Yeah?
Go forth into the north country.
It's going to the north of Israel, which is Babylon. So if the black horses are north of Israel, where you find Babylon, right? And
the black horses which are therein go forth into the north country.
North country.
And the white go forth after them.
And the whites, irregardless of their color, they also went after Babylon, right?
And the grizzled go forth toward the south country.
But it's omitting the red one, grizzled and the bay. So the grizzled are a set of a mixture of black and white, which is grizzled. Grizzled, they are going to the south country. You know, south of Israel, you find figurative of Egypt. If you are talking about the figurative of countries in the Bible, right? And the south country, they go. I mean, the grizzled, they go to the south country, and what?
And the bay went forth.
And these bay ones went forth, right?
And the bay went forth and sought to go, that they might walk to and fro through the earth.
Do you see? The whole earth is called to and fro. So it means in these two, the bay and the grizzle, this one just went south country, finished. And then this bay one was allowed to go through the whole world. You can see this is the map of the whole world. So that's to and fro the whole earth. So we now understand that this prophecy is talking to us in the last days, because what are we expecting in the last days? We are expecting the gospel to go into the loud cry. The loud cry goes to and fro the whole world. But we are seeing a set of horses which have been permitted to do that, the bay horses. Now, this is what we have been reading from the Bible. But we want to interpret the prophets to tell us exactly what we are looking at.
Yes.
Let's start with the mountains. We saw that these chariots, they came from between the two mountains. And the mountains are the mountains of brass, right? So we start by description of the mountains.
Yeah.
Right? Let's go and read from 2 till
Yes.
10.1. So we're going to read all that chapter on 10.1, right? And here, being composed.
10.1.
Where you are reading.
Being composed of brass, the two mountains can never, in even the smallest part, be carried away by wind or flood.
Right? Why? Because they have got metal. They are composed of metal, brass. So no wind can, demolish the mountains. These mountains are standing firm because they are metallic. They are composed of brass. Right? The description is. And then?
Matter not what betide them,
right,
of God's holy church, as seen.
In this, what is a mountain? God's holy church. We saw in Isaiah chapter 2, verse 2. Right? Go to the Bible, Isaiah 2, verse 2. What is the mountain? God's holy church. So, but we see in the New Testament, what are we seeing? We only see two churches. That is it. We'll see why we say in the New Testament, how we get to that idea that it's in the New Testament. Because it's only two churches God is talking about. Now, but let's hear, because why do I say a mountain is a church? Isaiah chapter 2, verse 2, right?
And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains.
So we are seeing the last day mountain. So we have a last day mountain there. It stands on the top of the mountain. So what is this area called top of the mountain? Top of Israel. When Abraham was called to go to Canaan, the land was mountainous, full of mountains. But where is the last mountain seen by Isaiah? On the top of the mountains, right? So when we are expecting the last church, where is it going to be? The church triumphant, it is going to be built on the top of the mountain. Where? In Jerusalem. That's the kingdom. being predicted there. But how we land to that is what we are studying today. Yeah? So let's go back to the paragraph on TR 10.1. So we have seen that these mountains are made up of brass, which is a strong metal. And then this metal, it only shows they are not made out of dust, because dust can easily go about with the wind. But this is metal, so they will stand firm. They don't demolish, they will stand firm. These are seen by God from the first brass mountain to the last brass mountain. And we are seeing in the last brass mountain, Isaiah is even predicting that it is going to be the church of God established on top of the mountains, which is in Jerusalem. Now, let's hear, because the last of that verse in Isaiah 2 verse 2, it says, many people will flock into it and say, let's go to pray before the mountain, for in Zion shall the law proceed from Zion. So we know we are talking of Jerusalem there when you are talking of Zion. The only place we find Mount Zion in the Bible. Now, let's read on, let's hear from Zechariah chapter 8 verse 3, yeah?
Zechariah 8 verse 3.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There in the same paragraph where you're reading.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Thus saith the Lord,
Mm-hmm.
Jerusalem, a city of truth,
Right.
and the mountain of holy mountain.
So that's why we will find the last brass mountain, the mountain which is the last church, which is seen by God. So whatever happened in the middle of the mountain, the first mountain, it was supposed to be a mountain right through the end. But whatever happened in the valley there is what we are seeing in our day-to-day life before this brass mountain. So when we lived, and what is happening is well described by these chariots. So we have got to study the chariots to understand what depleted this mountain, so that there is a valley there, and then we find the mountain also in the last days. What was causing all this depletion of this mountain, so that the mountain started rising at the end? Why? So, because here we are told that, thus saith the Lord, Jerusalem shall be called a city of truth. So the truth shall proceed from Jerusalem in the last day. And the mountain of the Lord, that's why we are seeing a holy mountain there. So it means Christians will be well established where they came from. We know before the persecution started, Christ had established the mountain or the church. The early Christian church established it in Jerusalem. But we see at the end, we see this mountain also there in Jerusalem. So when is the mountain going to be there, the headquarters? The headquarters of the mountain in the early Christian church, and then here we see still the headquarters is still there in Jerusalem. When is that? That's why we see the 144,000 standing on Mount Zion. So that's where the last brass mountain will be seen. But let's study and get to that point together. We will understand what is happening right now in our last time. It is what is here in this valley there, in these chariots. So God is communicating to us what is happening in our time and in time previous to us, before this mountain was demolished, before the formation of this one, how he is going to form this one, which will stand firm in Jerusalem, in the holy city of God. Now, let's see it. They must therefore represent the mountain. What do they mean? They must, after Zechariah 8 verse 3 there.
They must therefore represent her at a time when she is able to withstand the storm.
There is a time when the people of God will be able to withstand all this falsehood. The falsehood coming different times of feast, different times of holidays, different times. The truth of God, we have been told by Isaiah chapter 4 that 7 women will be saying, we'll eat our own bread, we'll wear our own apparel. So there is a time when the true worshippers of God will stand by, thus saith the Lord. So this is what we are studying today. So we see that as a mountain, firm mountain. There is a time God will have a people who worship him in spirit and truth. without any falsehood, without any apostasy. That will comprise the last mountain of the last day. Now let's read on. Let's hear. When she is clean.
When she is a clean and fit place for the dwelling of his holy presence, which, as the mountains denote, is to his saints a mighty fortress and an hiding place from the wind, and a covert from the tempest, as rivers of water in a dry place.
There is a time when our worship will invite the Holy One of Israel. When God will come and be amongst us in our worship. Yeah, so that's why when we are worshiping without his presence, when he says 7 women will stay, we say we worship our own, we will eat our own bread and wear our own apparel. You cannot find God in their presence. You can't. But there's a time which has been predicted by this prophet when God will be present, as he was present when the Israelites went out of Egypt. He was present. He was leading them. There is a time like that. So that's why we have to study this prophecy. We are going to study it, brethren, whether it calls for a full month or a full year for us to understand what God has written for us in Zechariah chapter 6 to understand. We will understand it. There is a time when there will be no several people worshiping differently. There will be, the people of God will be worshiping one Lord, one faith, one baptism. There is a time where they are depicted as this brass mountain. We are leading towards it. And until we are in this state, the end we are talking of is still far. Because he will come and find the people who are now united, worshiping God according. When he says today is a new moon, the people of God will be in a new moon, and God will be in a new moon. When he says today is Sabbath, the people of God will be in a Sabbath, and he will also be in a Sabbath. When they say Pentecost, when they say Passover, when they say Feast of Tabernacle, there won't be people coming for their camp meetings in different times. There will be a time where the worshippers of God will worship in spirit and truth with the same dates, with the same times, and those are the people comprising this brass mountain. That's where we are going. Now let's hear. Let's just finish that.
But he that worketh deceit,
right,
says the Lord, shall not dwell within my house.
Right.
He that telleth lies shall not tarry in my sight.
That's Isaiah, Psalms chapter 101, verse 7. Says, him who is a liar will not be in this brass mountain. Who is that? Lying about what? When he says today is a Sabbath, you should be found on the Sabbath. When he says today is a new moon, you should be found in the new moon. But if you profess to worship God without his times, without his appointed times, as he says in Jeremiah chapter 8, verse 7, here the storks in heaven know at the time, the turtle, the dove, they know the time. But my people do not know the judgment of the Lord. It says so in Jeremiah chapter 8, verse 7. When those who profess to follow God, like Isaiah chapter 4, verse 7, verse 4 verse 1, saying they are eating their own doctrines, they are wearing their own righteousness, their own apparel. They only want to be called by the name of Christ. These are liars. They will not be in this brass mountain. They won't be there. Now let's go to the next paragraph again. Point 2, 10.2, the facts.
The facts so far established show God's dwelling place in two separate sections.
So we have God's dwelling place in Zechariah chapter 6 shows that there are two places where God was found in the people who worship him. They were found in the first brass mountain and also will be found in the last brass mountain. But here, far from it, he won't be found there. Why? Because of the activity of these chariots. They have depleted his holy times. So he won't be found in anyone in this time. But he will be attracted to the people in the first brass mountain and also in the last brass mountain. But no way in the time of the valley. Why? Because as we read in Malachi chapter 4, verse 4 to 5, it says, before the great and dreadful day, God will send a message of the statutes, and the statutes are the feast. He said, this message will draw the hearts of the fathers to their children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers. So this message of the statutes will invite the presence of God. Now, I think I was just reading the verse without opening it. Just let's open the verse. Malachi chapter 4, verse 4 to 5.
Remember ye the law of Moses,
Right?
my servant,
Mm-hmm.
which I commanded unto him in Horeb,
Mm-hmm.
for all Israel,
Right?
with the statutes and judgments.
Right?
Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children,
Right?
and the heart of the children to their fathers.
Right. So we found these people who were worshiping in the early Christian church, the disciples, they were keeping the statutes. They were keeping the feasts, the Passover, the Pentecost. We saw them keeping, Paul keeping, Peter and all the disciples. On the day of Pentecost, they received the former rain on the day of a statute, which was the day of Pentecost. They were keeping the feast. So this keeping of the feast that they were doing, they were inviting the hearts of the fathers to their children, and the children to the fathers, because that's the gospel, which we are being sent at the last time. We are being sent through Malachi chapter 4, verse 4 to 5. Before the great and dreadful day of the Lord, the same gospel of the statutes will invite the hearts of the fathers to the children. So we will have worshippers in the last day who make up the last brass mountain. And we see how they make it up. They keep the times as it was being kept by the first Christians, we are the early Christian church. But what is happening here? Why these times are not being kept? You see exactly after the mountain at last. So whatever is happening here is no surprise. It's predicted already. It's there already through these chariots. What happened to the chariots? They were pulling down all these principles that made up the first brass mountain. Now, as we take those principles back, we are actually building the next, the last and final brass mountain. Right? Do you understand there? So we are going to find, when we pull back all these principles, the statutes and everything, and we pull them back, we invite the hearts of the fathers to our assemblies. Now, let's hear, so we find that God resided in these two brass mountains. Nothing there. Nothing in these chariots. Nothing. Right. The fact so far established shows God's dwelling place in two separate sections. These are the two. Right, read on.
The facts so far established show God's dwelling place in two separate sections.
Right.
For he has only one church organization
So when
at a
we say
time.
God has one church, we are meaning this first brass mountain was the church. And also this one, that's the church. It should be exactly the same as the first brass mountain in its principles. But if we lose the principles which were there in the first brass mountain, there we are down the valley, which by the name of God, because God says, wearing their own apparel. So we will bring all these principles to the next brass mountain. But if we refuse to take these principles which were there, which are the statutes, which they are keeping, the commandments, the testimonies, the judgments, we don't want to keep them like they were keeping them in the first brass mountain, then we cannot call ourselves the Church of God. The Church of God will be established. At last, the Church triumphant will have all the principles. And these are what God recognizes. Now, let's go further. The valley.
The valley.
So, between the two mountains is this valley. This is the valley. The valley, yes?
The valley lying between the two mountains.
Right, this is the valley.
Therefore denotes the period between the two holy church organizations which the mountains represent.
So it's the period, like I said before, this is the period between the early Christian church And the church triumphant, which will be found by Christ, holding all the principles like it was when he left. Right. This is clear from Zechariah 6. If you don't understand Zechariah 6, you go about breaking everywhere. We are the people of God, we are the what. But you come to Zechariah 6, you find you are dangling in these chariots, which have gone away from the principles of God. Now, this solid foundation. Now, let's go to the time of the mountain's actual existence. We want to find out the time just below there on 11.1. The time below. Okay.
The time of the mountain's actual existence. When ancient Israel marched out of Egypt, the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light to go by day and night.
Right.
And in the place where the cloud abode, there the children of Israel pitched their tents.
So we find the very first thing when they walked out of Egypt, on the 3rd month there in Exodus chapter 19, they received all the law, the 10 commandments. We saw them just on the Nehemiah, go to Nehemiah chapter 9 verse 13. Just on the 3rd month when they walked out of Egypt on the 1st month, which is the Passover. And then the 3rd month, which is the Pentecost, they received all the laws. Let's see which laws they received. In Nehemiah chapter 9 verse 13, Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb. Yeah?
Thou camest down also upon Mount Sinai,
Right.
and spakest with them from heaven, and gavest them right judgments,
1,
and true laws,
2,
good statutes,
3.
and commandments.
So it's not only the 10 commandments that they received on Mount Sinai. They received all these 4 laws: statutes, judgments, commandments, and the testimonies, as we found in Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 1, so that the presence of God will be amongst them. That's why in the last day, when we go in our time here, he sends Elijah, the prophet of our time, to give us, we read Malachi chapter 4, 4 verse 4. Read it again.
Remember ye the law of Moses my servant, which I commanded unto him in Horeb.
So he says, remember those 4 laws which have been given on Mount Sinai unto Horeb. Yes?
For all Israel,
Right?
with the statutes and judgments.
Why now does he want the statutes and judgment? And yet we saw 4 laws, which were testimonies, commandments, statutes, and judgment. Now he has separated and said he wants the statutes and judgments. Why? Because the commandments automatically we agree that we are going to keep. And because the testimonies automatically we agree we have to keep those other 2. But because we do not have these other 2, the judgments and the statutes, then he wants them to also to be combined with what we are agreeing, so that we all agree to keep the 4 laws. So these 4 laws are the ones now he sends Elijah, the prophet. In verse 5, this one. He says, remember the law of Moses, which I gave unto Horeb. Yeah?
With the statutes and judgments.
Right?
Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord.
So here, the great and dreadful day, when he comes, he wants also these other 2, the judgments and the statutes. With the statutes are the feasts, then the judgments. He wants them also to be together with the laws that we are already keeping, the 10 commandments and the testimonies we are keeping. So he wants them together with the judgments and the statutes, which are the feasts. So these ones he gave Israel the moment they walked out of Egypt. The 3rd month he gave them. Why? To bring the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to the fathers. So that's why he's sending them in the. So when people tell you that these laws were nailed to the cross, they're done away this time, they are actually deceiving you so that you don't invite the presence of God, the hearts of the Father. Ask them a question. Is Malachi not predicting our time before the great and dreadful day of the Lord? that these times are going to be sent back by God through a prophet, so that we are found to be with God in our presence, in our assembly. So if our assemblies are without the presence of God, or are without these laws, that's why God will spend even 1 year or 2 full years, or God knows how many years we're going to lock up all these churches, because he wants these 4 laws, which he took Israel out of Egypt, and he gave those 4 laws. These 4 laws, they invite his presence. So how can we want to continue to worship without his presence? So he wants us to agree to keep these laws, so that when we come together with him to worship his name when he is in our midst. He does not want blasphemy. He does not want us to eat our own bread, to wear our own apparel. He wants us to eat his doctrines. He wants us to wear his righteousness. So his righteousness comes from keeping these laws. Like it says in Deuteronomy chapter 6, go to Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 20, verse 17 first. What's the reason of keeping all these laws?
Ye shall diligently keep the commandments of the Lord your God, and his testimonies, and his statutes.
Right, the statutes are the feast, yeah.
Which he hath commanded thee.
Right, verse 24. Why? Why should we keep them?
And the Lord commanded us to do all these statutes,
right,
to fear the Lord
we
our
have to
God,
fear God, yeah,
for our good always,
for our protection, for our promotion, for our blessings,
that
right,
he might preserve us alive,
so that he also can sustain us when there is all these diseases coming, when there is all these things threatening our lives. These laws, when we keep them, he will keep us alive. He says, so that it may preserve our lives. And what? Verse 25.
and it shall be our righteousness.
And these laws are the ones that bring righteousness amongst us. So when we have these laws, as it was being kept by Paul and Peter and the disciples, they had God's righteousness. Christ's righteousness was in the laws, and it invited his presence in their midst. So we also, in the last time, we have his presence in our midst. So this is a simple equation, brethren. It's a simple thing. When he wants us to be righteous, he brings us those 4 laws, as he did when he took the Israelites out of Egypt. The very first thing is to announce these 4 laws to them, so that when they now walk down the wilderness into Canaan, they have his presence. That's why they were so fearful when they were walking out, crossing the Red Sea. When it had parted, the waters parted, that showed the presence of God. God wants to repeat the same thing to us. When we cross also the seas, heading to the second Exodus, we will do exactly the same as those who crossed in front of us. We had all these 4 laws and the presence of God. Through Elijah the prophet, sent by Malachi 4, verse 4 to 5, we're supposed to have that blessing of the statutes and judgments. Now let's read on. Let's hear. Exodus chapter 13, verse 21 there. When we have the presence, now what happens? Okay, start from the beginning of that. When ancient Israel marched out of Egypt.
When ancient Israel marched out of Egypt,
right,
the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud,
right,
to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire, to give them light to go by day and night.
Right.
And in the place where the cloud abode, there the children of Israel pitched their tents.
When they pitched their tent, the pillar of fire and the cloud were there amongst them. Why? Why were they there with the Israelites? Because they had all the principles that make this brass mountain. He wants the same principles in the last days that make us have this last brass mountain. And he wants it from us. And those who are going to be sealed will enjoy the presence of God. The 144,000. That's why it says, strive by all your means to enter into the number. Because the number will be led by God. The presence of God will be there in their habitation, in their assemblies. there it will be, the cloud will be there, and the pillar of fire will be there, though we cannot see with our naked eyes. But he promises that when we keep these statutes and judgments, we will invite the heart of the fathers to the children, and the children to the father. The father is God, is the only one called father. We are not called father in the Bible there. We are children. So the hearts of the fathers invited to the children, and the children, so we have his presence around us. Why? They could not cross the wilderness and enter into Canaan without the presence of God, without these 4 laws that he gave Moses on Mount Sinai. They wouldn't find any solace without that. If they just walked without all these laws, the presence of God was not going to be amongst them. So, the same as some who just want to worship without these 4 laws, the presence of God, you won't find it. It's only brought by these statutes and judgment, which brings this presence of the fathers to the children, like it was with the Israelites. Now read on this here. But some years
after the Israelitish movement had marched into the promised land, God withdrew his personal presence from among them.
Right. So you can know exactly what has happened when God takes his presence off amongst them. What had happened to Israel? We will find that they had now offended those 4 laws. Those 4 laws, brethren, they are deadly. This is the reason why he sent all of them out to Babylon when they tampered with these 4 laws. So this is the reason why, even in our midst, in our time, God can withdraw his presence and let us suffer. Why? Because of those 4 laws. When they are not there in our habitation, when they are not there being worshipped, God being worshipped with these laws, these are the laws that make him God. These are the laws that make him who he is. And when we slide these laws, he will withdraw his presence. Like what he did at some time, God withdrew. Let's see how he withdrew this presence. You read in 2 Chronicles down below there, chapter 36, verse 17 to 19, 17, 19, and 20. Let's see. Therefore. So when they messed around with these laws, if you want to know exactly the reason why they were sent away to Babylon, why God removed them, you read the whole chapter of Ezekiel chapter 20, it will tell you exactly why. Yeah, they did not walk in his statutes. That's the reason which is there. Now here is saying them before he removed them. Let's hear. Therefore
he brought upon them the king of the Chaldees,
right,
who burnt the house of God and brake down the wall of Jerusalem, and burnt all the palaces thereof with fire,
right,
and destroyed all the goodly vessels thereof. And them that had escaped from the sword carried he away to Babylon, where they were servants to him and his sons until the reign of the kingdom of Persia.
This is what he did to them. When they slighted these 4 laws, he withdrew his presence and commanded the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, to go and kill them. And the few that were remaining, he carried them as captives to his land in Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar did that. Why? Because they were slighting these 4 laws. It's deadly. What we are studying here, we are studying the means God has given mankind to keep his presence amongst our habitation, amongst our dwellings, amongst our assemblies, amongst our lives, so that we can enjoy a life with God, worshiping him according to the way he has designed, according to the way which make him what he is. That's these 4 laws. So don't tamper with them. It's feast were nailed to the cross. And these are his major laws. There's no government without statutes. Yeah? Don't tell me the governments are only keeping the commandments only without statutes. There's no government. All the holidays that we see, the bank holidays, the what? These are statutes. This is what makes that government a government. So if they can have these statutes and judgments, what about God? God has got his own. these Passovers, these camp meetings, these Lord's Suppers that we are slighting. That's why he is ordering Ezekiel 9 to say, slay utterly. And he says, start with those in the front of the altar. Why? These five men, those who continue to slight God, of these, Ezekiel chapter 9, verse 1 to 6, he has got these 5 men with slaughter weapons. They are waiting. They are waiting at the door for the sealing process to go, for the numbering of the servants of God. And those who will be found without these, they are going down the slaughter of Ezekiel 9 by these 5 angels that are waiting, like it was in the time. Let's go to one chapter so that you know this Ezekiel 9 with 5. Let's see first from Ezekiel. Do we have these 5 men with slaughter weapons from Ezekiel 9 verse 1? Because so many people say, oh, this is not our policy, this is not in our policy, this is not Adventism, this is whatever. But it is in the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. So whatever you think is not there or whatever you have written, is if it does not include that one, we have not written anything. Because this is the warning coming to the church. Now read Ezekiel chapter 9, right? Verse 1.
He cried also in mine ears with a loud voice,
Right.
saying, cause them that have charge over the city to draw near,
Right?
even every man with his destroying weapon in his hand.
Right.
And behold, 6 men came from the way of the higher gate, which lieth toward the north, and every man a slaughter weapon in his hand.
Do you see these 6 men coming with slaughter weapons? And what? Read.
And one man among them was clothed with linen,
Right?
with a writer's inkhorn by his side.
Right.
And they went in and stood
So
beside
if
the
one
brazen.
man had a writer's inkhorn, how many were left with slaughter? 5. 5 men, right? And verse 4.
And the Lord said unto him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and
Right.
set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the
So
abominations.
we all agree we are in the sealing period. So there's no one dreaming in this verse. We are being sealed. A mark is being placed on our foreheads. And judgment begins in the house of God first, according to 1 Peter 4 verse 17. So what happens next after the sealing? Read on, verse 5.
And to the others he said in mine
To
hearing,
those 5 with slaughter weapons, yeah?
go ye after him
Go after this one who was marking.
through the city and
Right.
smite.
Right?
Let not your eye spare, neither have ye pity. Slay utterly, old and young, both maids and little children and women, but come not near any man upon whom is the mark.
Right?
And begin at my sanctuary. Then they began at the ancient men which were before the house.
Why would they begin with the ancient men who were supposed to be teaching this message? They did not teach it. They did not teach this message. That's why God says, start with them. They did not warn the church. So, but others were warned. Why? Elsewhere, somebody, he had sent Elijah, the prophet, to bring these statutes for sealing. These are the sealing messages. People sneaked and they got the seal. But there are some who did not. So it says, those who were supposed to give them this message, start with them. Start with them, and they began at my sanctuary. But let's go to Testimonies for the Church by Sister White, so that you know it's exactly, this is our message for Sabbath keepers. Testimonies for the Church, volume 3. I hope you're writing them so that you can argue with whoever tells you that this is not Adventism, this is not our Sabbath message, this is not. Tell them this one is our ancient message. Right. And here it says, go to 267.1. Listen carefully to this paragraph by Sister White. These men, 5 men with slaughter weapons on Ezekiel 9. She urges us to go and ponder over this message. Now let's hear who are standing.
Who are standing in the council of God at this time? Is it those who virtually excuse wrongs among the professed people of God, and who murmur in their hearts, if not openly, against those who would reprove sin?
Right. While these people are sighing and crying and asking, where are the debts? Where are these What time do you take Lord's Supper? What time do you go to camp meeting? There's some memory in their hearts or openly to say, these people, they are always complaining about church. These people, are there people like that? Then the question is, are they those who are standing on the Lord's side? Read on, let's hear.
Is it those who take their stand against them and sympathize with those?
Right. Read again. Is it those?
Is it those who take their stand against them and sympathize with those who commit wrong?
Right?
No, indeed.
No, indeed. Those who sympathize with those who are making things wrong debts and whatever. Is it those who are sympathizing with those who are changing debts? Making people worship not according to the debts in the Bible? Is it those? He says no. And let's hear more.
Unless they repent.
Unless they repent.
And leave the work of Satan in oppressing those who have the burden of the work and in holding up the hands of the sinners in Zion. They will never receive the mark of God's sealing approval.
Run and shelter them and protect them and say, don't despise them, please. Peace and safety message to them. You'll never receive the mark. Sister White says it. Read on, let's hear.
They will fall in the general destruction of the wicked.
Right.
Represented by the work of five men
in Ezekiel 9
bearing slaughter weapons.
Did you hear that? Who is going to shush them? These ones who are over protecting those who are wrong. They will go under this general slaughter. That's what Sister White says. The general slaughter of the men, the 5 men in Ezekiel 9. Read on this here.
Mark this point with care.
Mark it with care. Sister White is warning us as a people. Mark this point with care in the sealing process. Right?
Those who receive the pure mark of truth.
Right?
Wrought in them by the power of the Holy Ghost.
Right?
Represented by a mark by the man in linen.
Right?
Are those that sigh and cry for all the abominations that be done in the church.
That's Ezekiel 9.
Their love for purity.
Right?
And the honor and glory of God is such. And they have so clear a view of the exceeding sinfulness of sin that they are represented as being in agony, even sighing and crying. Read the 9th chapter of Ezekiel.
Right. Sister White's sending us back to the 9th chapter of Ezekiel. So if you are told it's not our policy, it's not in our syllabus, it's not in our... Say, my syllabus is the Bible and the spirit of prophets. Sister White and the Bible, if they support you, you are clean, home and dry. Don't go under those who tell you that all this was nailed to the cross. All this is not our policy. Now, go and search in the Bible and see if it is there. In Ezekiel 9, it is there. In Testimonies for the Church, Volume 3, page 267, first paragraph, we have read it. And if you want more testimonies, I'll give you Testimonies for the Church, Volume 5, page 211. Go and read exactly. This is going to be literally performed by God and his angels, like he did in Egypt. Firstborns, that was literal. When the firstborns died, it was literal. So we have our firstborns here. The ancient men who were before the altar. These are the firstborns. And then says, slay utterly young and old, but come not near any with the mark. So the scroll has been unrolled for you to understand and run for dear life. Now let's go and finish the way it says.
But the general slaughter of all.
No. In the 12.1. That's where we are.
Okay. Were it not for the fact that a similar incident occurs in the Christian era, perhaps we would have to conclude, without going further, that the 2 mountains of brass are symbolical of the 2 sections of the church in Old Testament time. But inasmuch as the dark ages from 538 AD to 1798 AD divide the holy mountain of God into two separate parts, we are compelled to prove from another angle the time to which these two figurative mountains of brass apply.
Right. So what is meant by the spirit of prophecy here is these two. What split this mountain to make it two? What did that? The thing that divided was Constantine introducing paganism. So that's why we are so mindful when you mention all the days that are not in the Bible that came through Constantine. He just brought them to these. We were believing all these statutes, judgments, and testimonies. He brought paganism to them, changed all the days of God. And that's what made this valley. But then we still have the valley now. We overcame it. Because it says, unto 2,300 days shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So the sanctuary started in 1844, predicted by William Miller from 2,300 days, and in 1844. When Christ entered the Holy of Holies, it was the purpose of restarting these times which the men of sin had depleted. Now, if you see people refusing to go back to the times which were there in the first brass mountain, know for sure that they have been taken by the Dark Ages. That's why we call them Babylonians, because Dark Ages in Babylon. So they are taken, they refuse to take these times back to build this brass mountain. So they are still swimming in the valley of decision. This is the valley of decision. What decision? To go back to the times which were there in the first brass mountain. So continue meditating and deciding and swimming there. Until Christ comes, you only have those who have taken all the times back, because they were promised already that from 2,300 days in 1844, they are back. So they are now back. Their prophet will take them and educate those who can. The 144,000 received them. Those who can, it's not everybody. It's just a minute number, 144,000. It's not even half of a million. The rest of the billions, you are being told that our church now is heading toward the billion, toward whatever. Stuff swimming in the valley of decision. So I hope we understand Zechariah chapter 6 in detail. And we are here now to talk about it in detail. This is just introduction of what we have read. And now we're analyzing it step by step so that we cannot. I've discovered some people are really too slow to learn quick. So let's go step by step with this. And we enjoy the presence of God in our assemblies. Now, we have only described the mountains and the valley. We still have a lot of things to describe. So by the end of I don't know how many weeks we are talking about Zechariah 6, I'm not in a hurry to finish the lesson. I'm in a hurry to make sure everyone opens the brain. Those who are supposed to be saved, they understand. And when we move on, we know what we are doing. For our Lord is mercy to continue hammering on the same topic, on the same chapter, until we open up. So we're going to open up. If we don't finish by tomorrow morning, then it means next Sabbath we continue Zechariah 6 until it finishes. We will never leave any chapter unknown. Each chapter in the Bible is for us to understand. And as we continue coming to BSM TV and learning in detail, bring your pens and your papers so that you write down and you have your mind fortified by the truth and you get your seal. You don't need to wait for someone to give you permission to get a seal. You run for dear life. It's a time for you to run for dear life. This is what I know. Worship is all about making sure your own spirit is saved, not others. So let's see where we can wind it, and then we can go to bed early, and then in the morning we meet again at 9:30. Is it 10, whatever is the time, right? So let's go to the paragraph which says the metal composition.
Okay. The metal composing the mountains must represent that which is to make up what they stand for.
Right. So why are we having this metal of brass? No gold, no silver, no nothing. Why is this metal there? It's because it represents that which is to make up what they stand for. What is it? Let's read one lesson.
Explicitly, the brass must disclose the people who are to make up two holy sections of the Christian church.
Right. So it's the brass supposed, but how? How? In the second chapter.
In the second chapter of Daniel.
You remember the statue of Daniel? I don't have it on my board, but take my body as the statue, right? The statue of Daniel, what happened?
In the second chapter of Daniel, 4 empires are symbolized by a great metallic image of gold.
You remember when we
silver,
saw the statue of Daniel? We had gold, silver on the chest, brass on the tummy,
and iron
on the legs.
A well understood prophecy of Babylon, Medo-Persia, Grecia, and Rome.
We understood that this one, the head was Babylon, the chest, Medo-Persia, the Greece with his tummy, and the iron was Rome. We understood it when we started that statue, right? And what happened, right? So
while brass, being third to gold,
right,
precisely fits the third empire, and consequently has the numerical value of 3.
So why brass? On the statue, brass comes number 3 on Greece, on the tummy. So we have gold, which is 1, which is Babylon, and Greece, and the Medo-Persia, which is silver, which is number 2, and we have Greece, which is number 3. So that 3 is important. It's a numerical value which is important on what? Let's hear.
So, being of brass, the mountains denote that the church which they symbolize is in period number 3.
So the mountain denote that they are in period number 3 in world history, right?
And the fact that presupposes 2 preceding periods, making in all 3 great divisions of time.
Right.
The first from creation to the flood.
So we are being told the time, the whole world history, from creation of Adam to the flood of Noah, is the first division, period number 1. So from the flood, from the creation of Adam to the flood is period number 1, right? And what? From the flood.
From okay, and the fact
No, from the flood.
From the flood,
right,
to the crucifixion of Christ,
right,
and the third.
So the second one comes from Noah's time to the time Christ died on the cross. That's period number 2, right?
From the flood to the crucifixion of Christ, and the third from the crucifixion to his second coming.
Right. So let me simplify for you. Our reader was a bit lost somewhere. But from creation to the flood of Noah is period number 1. And then from the flood of Noah to the crucifixion of Christ on the cross is period number 2 on the earth history. And then from the flood, from the crucifixion of Christ to the second coming of Christ, period number 3. Why? We get 3 as a numerical number. When the statute of the world history was presented, we saw brass comes number 3. So that brass which has been used by God for the mountains are the mountains of brass. Why? Because he is now talking of the period from the crucifixion of Christ to the second coming of Christ, which he gave the metal brass, like he gave the third period, which is Greece, the metal brass. So I see how chronological it is and easy to comprehend. Now, when he's talking about period of brass, he's talking of our period in the New Testament. That's when we find this mountain, which is a brass mountain, and the last one, which is present. The first one is the early Christian church soon after the crucifixion, beginning the third period of brass. And at the end of the period of brass, that's where we find Christ coming, the second coming of Christ. He will find people who are in the period of brass or who are in the third period of the earth history. That's simple as that, right? So that's why it says these mountains, which were seen by Zechariah, were brass mountains. So we haven't gone through to see exactly what happened there. If we had time, we would also go into this, Daniel chapter 12 there, talking about 1,290 days, 1,335. You find them in Daniel chapter 12. And talking about 1,260. We all know these times, but we want to see how they fall. The 390 years, 1890, we find in 1890 what happened in 1890 using the 430 period of counting, which is in the Bible. And then also here we have 40 years of famine, which was there. So all these, they hold the New Testament. And any reader who understands these prophecies will be broadened in thinking, will understand what he's dealing with, and will not run like a butterfly without a radar. So now today, we have just introduced this lesson on Zechariah chapter 6. And because we introduced that, and we are going to continue tomorrow, starting from where we have left. I think it will go step by step. Don't rush. We want to go with it step by step. Those who attend all these lessons will get the full history of Zechariah chapter 6, and you'll never be the same. You actually know what you need for you to be saved. May God bless this lesson as we are going to ponder and understand more about it. And I hope it's going to leave us more nearer to understanding the truth and the seal, the truth and the seal of the living God. Amen.